Naoya Zenin isn't just a villain in Jujutsu Kaisen. He's a mirror reflecting the darker pressures of our world in 2025. When you look at his obsession with power, his entitlement, and his fragile ego, it's hard not to see shadows of people we come across online, at work, or even at home. I want to show you how Naoya's psychology maps onto trends we're actually seeing around us. He's a useful mirror for cultural patterns that are growing more visible today. Recent reports show that many young people, especially men, feel increasingly isolated and vulnerable to toxic strength-first messaging. That tells us that Naoya isn't only a fictional danger, he reflects wounds that are opening wider in real life. In this video, I'll trace how Naoya's worldview was formed, why it feels so familiar to us now, and what it looks like when those beliefs play out in the real world. And it all starts with the making of a fragile ego. Why does praise sometimes weaken rather than strengthen a person? That's the paradox behind Naoya Zenin's early years. From the start, the Zenin clan didn't affirm his kindness or imagination. They tied his worth to bloodline and talent, things he never chose. It might sound empowering, but when approval depends on traits you can't control, it doesn't build security. It creates a cage where failure feels unthinkable. Research on achievement pressure backs this up. Children raised under constant demands for excellence often experience higher stress and struggle with self-worth even when they succeed. Being told that strength equals value wrote Naoya's life script. He never had space to ask, what else could make me matter? Indoctrination works this way. It narrows the questions you're allowed to ask. For a child, being forced into silence about who they might become creates desperation to protect an identity handed down by others. Instead of curiosity, you grow into defense mode. Instead of a voice, you inherit a performance. That dynamic isn't trapped in fiction. Today, it shows up in households where love feels conditional on grades, trophies, or income. The details change, but the rule stays the same. Succeed or risk losing approval. And when success becomes the only stable ground, every stumble feels like the bottom dropping out. Ask yourself, did your praise ever feel conditional? If so, you know how quickly recognition turns into pressure. And in 2025, there is an even bigger megaphone, the digital spotlight. Social platforms amplify these expectations for gifted kids, artists, athletes, or gamers. Once you're labeled the best, the fall from that pedestal becomes terrifying. Studies report that social media adds weight to performance anxiety with constant audience feedback, making failure feel like public collapse. Naoya's fragile core mirrors this perfectly. The clan's voices conditioning him at home and strangers online echoing that same demand to never break. You've probably seen it play out. Maybe a classmate who seemed unstoppable suddenly burned out, or someone whose achievements looked perfect from the outside, but you later learned they were drowning inside. That's the same mechanism. A fragile identity built on constant comparison can either shatter under the weight or twist into entitlement as a self-protection. Some young men, in particular, face heavy cultural pressure toward roles defined by strength and control. For some, the outcome is collapse. For others, it's doubling down, insisting the world confirm the identity they were promised. Naoya becomes a warning about what happens when validation hardens instead of heals. His strength isn't real security. It's armor he clings to because without it, he fears disappearing. And that's the hidden cost of toxic validation. It shapes a life around fragile power. The question that follows is simple but dangerous. When strength becomes the only thing you can count on, what happens next? For Naoya Zenin, masculinity doesn't mean confidence. It means power, control, and proof at someone else's expense. This is where toxic masculinity takes root. Defined by traits like dominance, emotional suppression, and aggression, it creates a worldview where self-worth depends on keeping others beneath you. Research shows men who adopt these rigid norms often suffer higher rates of stress, depression, and isolation, and the culture around them bears the cost through strained relationships and greater violence. That's why Naoya's relationships collapse into contests. He doesn't approach people as equals. He sees them as rivals to conquer or props to hold up his fragile ego. His open contempt for women is a direct extension of this belief system. In that script, masculinity is measured not by empathy or trust, but by subjugating others. What he calls superiority is really fear of being exposed as inadequate. And when someone grows up equating kindness with weakness, cruelty starts to look like strength. The catch, though, is that victories never satisfy him. Even when he gains recognition, the high is brief. Hierarchies are unstable. There's always someone advancing behind you. Living inside that ladder means you never get to rest. Every achievement carries the shadow of being replaced. It's the same emptiness that makes his swagger feel hollow to us as viewers. You see echoes of this far outside fiction. In workplaces that mistake aggression for leadership, collaboration suffers. Teams fracture and people burn out. This obsession with dominance doesn't just poison relationships, it undermines the very systems that depend on cooperation. Success stops being about doing good work together and becomes about who can shout the loudest or stomp the hardest. Online, the cycle amplifies further. Social media rewards packaging and identity, and hypermasculine branding, whether alpha or sigma, turns these toxic values into lifestyle products. A recent report noted how manosphere communities package this culture as aspirational, drawing in men who feel cut off or insecure. It's the same dynamic Naoya embodies, clinging it to a brittle identity it's sold as strength while avoiding the fear lurking underneath. Look at the way he projects onto others. He cuts them down not because they truly threaten him, but because belittling them gives him a few seconds of relief. Projection becomes his shield, but the cost is steep. He lives in constant fear of slipping down the hierarchy he worships. That's the irony. His downfall isn't physical defeat, it's never escaping the cage of toxic validation. And the reason his story lingers is that the same cage exists all around us, in careers, online spaces, and cultural messages that still measure manhood in this narrow way. Which raises the harder question: how does someone end up internalizing that belief system so completely in the first place? Inherited beliefs don't always feel like lessons. They feel like the ground under your feet. Once internalized, they don't present themselves as optional. They settle in as the default way of interpreting the world. Psychological research even frames this in models like the social class worldview model, which suggests that family and cultural values operate as a lens shaping how people see and respond to reality. For Naoya Zenin, that lens was fixed from birth. His clan's obsession with power and hierarchy wasn't something he weighed against other perspectives. It was the only script he knew, and he absorbed it without question. That absence of reflection is what made his worldview brittle. Maki Zemin, raised under the same roof, proves the contrast. Maki chose to reject the clan script. Naoya didn't. She's proof that even the heaviest legacy can be resisted, while Naoya shows what happens when you refuse to test it. Watching them together makes the stakes clear. Either you engage with what you've inherited, or it consumes you. This isn't just a clan issue or a fiction issue. In real life, family expectations about careers, political allegiances, or even definitions of success often pass down unquestioned. To challenge them can feel like betraying your community or disrespecting your family's story. The weight of that obligation makes the cycle hard to interrupt. In Naoya's case, loyalty to Zemin tradition gave him recognition at home, but it welded him to values that stripped away his humanity. The harder part is knowing which beliefs are actually yours. Many people never get that clarity. Instead, they end up repeating roles written for them, mistaking obedience for authenticity. That sense of living on someone else's script doesn't come down to lack of intelligence. It comes from environments where questioning is punished while compliance is rewarded. Today, the internet supercharges these inherited scripts. Social platforms are designed to give you more of what you already engage with. Algorithms in this way can act like echo chambers, feeding back the beliefs you started with until they feel universally true. Even if doubt flickers, the non-stop reinforcement creates momentum toward loyalty rather than reflection. For young adults, escaping that feedback loop requires more than bravery. It demands unlearning the digital routines that keep them locked in. Naoya's response to threat shows another piece of the pattern. When confronted with challenges to his worldview, he projects. Instead of questioning whether the Zenin code served him, he attacks anyone who resists it. That behavior mirrors what happens when people use defensiveness as a shield. It's a coping tactic at first, avoiding painful reflection. But over time, it corrodes relationships and entrenches harm. What seems protective soon becomes destructive. And in Naoya's arc, that rigidity is fatal. He hardens into cruelty because he can't imagine another way to be. By refusing to examine the values he inherited, he becomes their most extreme expression. His story illustrates a simple truth. Unexamined beliefs don't just shape you, they can hollow you out. Growth doesn't mean discarding everything you were given. It means choosing what reflects your actual values. That's the choice Naoya never made. But it's the choice still open to us. And that choice is where the warning in his story becomes personal. Naoya Zenin isn't only a narcissistic character, he's a warning. His arc shows what unfolds when unchecked privilege, ego, and inherited power turn into a worldview that crushes everything around it. That same mentality is visible today, shaping how many people measure their worth and how they treat others. And the consequences aren't abstract. Men face a disproportionate risk in the current mental health crisis. Reports show that they are more likely to die by suicide and less likely to seek help, outcomes tied to norms that punish vulnerability. If Naoya's pattern hit home for you, tell me which part: family pressure, the online grind, or the cult of strength in the comments. I don't want you to walk away cynical. Naoya's ruin is a warning, but you get to choose which parts of your past you carry forward. If this kind of character analysis matters to you, hit like and subscribe. There's so much more to unpack about how fiction reflects real life.